The gender pay gap has been at the heart of many heated discussions this year. Many companies have had to disclose figures showing any difference in pay between their male and female employees.
Now, today is what campaigners call Equal Pay Day. It aims to highlight discrimination in the workplace. According to figures from the Office for National Statistics, the gender pay gap in 2017 was at 14%. Well, campaigners say that means that women technically work for free for the last 52 days of the year.
Counting back from the end of the calendar, that gets us to today, the 10th of November. Let's talk about it now with Kate Cooper, Head of Research at the Institute of Leadership and Management. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. So that is a calculation around at that point in time in the year. There's been so much focus on this issue, particularly this year. It's been building up. Do you get a sense that anything is changing?
I think it's a bit too early to say, because we're here the same day as we were last year. We're still working, notionally for 52 days for no money, as it were, which is a great way of drawing attention to the subject. I think the attention the gender pay gap got, especially amongst media companies earlier this year, was terrific, because people had nowhere to hide. People were being forced to report, and the level of compliance, I think, was really actually excellent with the reporting. And now we're sure that HR directors around the country are saying, what are we doing about it? How next year can we make sure we've closed that gap?
Do you have evidence for that?
Well, the evidence is how much interest there is, how much advice is out there.
That's not evidence, is it?
No,
I mean,
isn't.
an HR company can, as they all do, write a policy statement, and yet. I mean, that's been the reality for many years, hasn't it?
It has, but we've never had a measure as effective of the gender pay gap until now. And I totally agree with you about policy. And people can sit in rooms writing policies forever and ever, but actually what this is about is individuals being made every day by people who hire, by people who promote, by people who give high-profile projects, and collectively, if they're thinking more creatively, if they're taking a little bit longer to think about how can I get not a man in this role, who else might do just as good a job, then collectively we'll see a difference.
Is there a difference between the way the gender pay gap is being addressed and other pay gaps, so ethnicity pay gaps, and diversity in general? Is the whole coverage this year now skewing towards the gender pay gap?
I think that's a problem. Once we start talking about gender, we get, well, what about all the other people? But if you start defining jobs on the basis of what needs to be done, not what the person did before, or not on X number of years of experience that might not be relevant, then everybody benefits.
The thing is, that's common sense.
It is common sense.
It's common sense, but it's common sense that hasn't been applied for years. It seems to be the norm. So I'm just wondering what will push this, what will make it different. So for the last 2 years, in fact, 2016 and 2017, 10th of November has been that day. It hasn't moved. When will it move significantly, and what will drive that?
Well, it's going to be a business case that ultimately drives it. When there are talent shortages, then people have to think differently about where they get their talent from. And we're already getting huge predictions about, especially in leadership and management, there aren't enough people to take those roles. And once we have to look elsewhere, or we're losing people, then that will drive the solution, because the talent's absolutely there.
What rights do individuals have now? There might be someone watching this now, a female employee, thinking, I'm hearing what you're saying, and what rights do they have? They go in the workplace and they go to HR and they say, do you know what? I've got a sense maybe that I've been underpaid relative to so-and-so who sits opposite me. What are their rights?
Well, they can certainly take it to HR and say that there seems to be a discrepancy, and I think that's going to be really helped by a lot more openness about who's earning
but again,
what.
You said we know they can do that, but what are their rights?
But isn't that making it the problem of the individual to say, I feel I am being discriminated against? It's so easy, it's just one person, to put a case while they're wrong. So that, I don't think, is the angle that we should be taking on this.
I think if people know how they are equipped, if there is a system in place that says you are allowed, you are able to use this system to prove or to say, I want information, then they can do something about it. Because so far, those at the top haven't been willing to turn around to those lower down and say, hold on, I don't think we're treating you quite fairly, because it's quite easy to leave it alone, isn't it?
It is, unless you're being called out on your gender pay gap. And I think that's really
And that's the question.
helping.
So how do you
and
know
also,
how to
women
call...
going into the workforce or people underrepresented groups can start looking at companies and say, if I want a career, if I'm serious about advancing, do I really want to work somewhere where there's a 70% gender pay gap? And if there are talent shortages, they're going to just not go and not apply to those companies. So it's back to the individual, I suppose, feeling empowered to actually be able to make decisions about where they apply for jobs on the basis of this sort of information.
It's an intriguing subject. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Kate Cooper is Head of Research and Policy Standards at the Institute of Leadership and Management.
It's 24 minutes past 7.